Well, hey, everybody. Getting ready to record episode 152 of Mike in the Midwest, enjoying every day. And here we go. Make sure I get the feedback from last week's show up. Got it here. All right, here we go. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to episode number 152 of Mike in the Midwest, our mini podcast for the amazing patrons just like you of the Be Our Guest podcast. Of course, my name is Mike Rallman, host of the Be Our Guest podcast. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Be Our Guest Mike. And if we're not connected, let's make that happen this week. I would love to talk to you on the socials and see what's going on in your life and be able to follow you as well. So if I'm not following you, give me a holler. Say, hey, I'm a patron. I need you to follow me. And I definitely will. We need to make that connection. And for those that are sailing with us on the VR Guest Podcast Cruise, less than 3 weeks. We are getting so close. We'll be talking about that here in a second. But hope you're having a great week wherever this show finds you. I hope you're enjoying the Be Our Guest podcast we have this week. We had Cody on Monday. Great trip report, Caribbean Beach. I enjoyed talking to him. He's actually right down the road from me, about 7-8 minutes away from the Be Our Guest Podcast Studios down Highway 364 here in the Westplex in St. Charles County. So we got to talk about his trip. Lots of fun. We'll also have listener questions coming your way on Wednesday with Ricky and Scott. And then on Friday, Scott and I come your way. It's just a Scott and Mike show where we are talking about making childhood connections to things around Walt Disney World. So when you walk around Walt Disney World, there are certain places, there are certain things that lend themselves to making direct connections to your past. For me, the example I gave Scott when I threw this idea out to him, just a little preview of Friday's show, was on one of the very first trips I took with Pam to Walt Disney World. This was right after Pop Century was built. Oh, the first time we stayed at Pop Century, at least. It was right after Pop Century opened. I mean, it was brand new. Like, I remember the trees were just like put into the ground. Like, it was, you could smell the paint on the building still. And I just remember, like, we stayed in the 70s, our first trip. But I remember walking around the entire resort because it was just awesome, right? We were at Walt Disney World. We couldn't believe how cool everything was. And, this is way before the podcast, way before anything. Obviously, I wasn't a travel agent. I didn't do it. I was just a Disney fan. I wasn't on the internet, nothing like that. This was well before any of that stuff. I was just kind of like, Mike from Missouri, just, a guy that had driven down, a teacher with his, girlfriend. And we went down and we're going to have a good time at Disney. That's all we were. And I was blown away by Pop Century. And, I was walking through, looking at everything, the foosball guys, between the two buildings. But when I saw that big wheel in the 60, was it it's 60 section, isn't it? Yeah, I think it is. 50s, 60s. It's over by the 70s. Anyway, wherever it is, the big wheel. I still have that picture because I made Pam with this. I mean, this was an older camera. Like, this was pre-iPhone. I'm pretty sure it was pre-iPhone. But we had like a physical digital camera. It wasn't a cell phone. It was like a digital camera. And she took my picture of me like in front of this big wheel because I had that exact big wheel. And it took me back to my childhood home on St. Daniel Lane, which we moved out of when I was in 6th grade. Of those times with my buddies, Ryan and Jeff, we all had big wheels and we were like 3 or 4. We'd go to mini school and then we'd ride big wheels at mini school, which was our preschool. It was like at a church, but we would ride our big wheels around, our little street. We would play demolition derby because it was like a thing in the 70s and 80s. And, just good times. But that big wheel looked exactly like my big wheel. Now, later on, I got a green machine. If you remember the green machine, it had like 2 sticks on the side. That was like the deluxe version. You drove it by steering it with sticks. But that one big wheel, Pop Century, I had that thing. My buddy across the street, Ryan, had that thing. And that took me back to my childhood. So every time I see that big wheel at Pop Century, it reminds me directly of my childhood. And there's a few different places at Walt Disney World, like icons and items and just things and even decor in different places that take me immediately back to childhood memories. So we talk about that on Friday. And the reason I did that show, it wasn't so much for you to hear about my childhood, even though, is the host of the show. That's what we do. Hopefully, it's kind of like Mike in the Midwest, but to the more broad audience of our podcast, is that as you listen to that show, maybe it's going to trigger, and I hope it does. It should. That's the goal of a good podcast, I think, in my opinion, is that as you listen to that show and you say, oh, yeah, Mike, that big wheel. Well, maybe you had a big wheel like that. But at the same time, while you're listening to Friday's show, hopefully you're thinking about, oh, but at Pop Century, they also had the potato heads. Like I had the potato head set. Or over at All Star Sports, they have the big Buzz and Woody figures. I had my kids had those and they played those, and I remember that they were in my child's room when they were 3, and that takes me back to that night where that was the only thing that I could get them to stop crying was when I gave them Woody, the doll. Whatever. I always want this podcast to be able to be a friend and to be something that will be a companion to you as you cut the grass, as you walk the dog, as you endure some tough miles on a run or a walk, or travel miles if you're a truck driver. I appreciate all of our truck drivers, or deliver the mail, whatever it is, because I know that my podcasts get me through runs on the treadmill, walks on the treadmill every morning. And I appreciate you taking the time to put us in your rotation. And I really appreciate you being here on Patreon, because you guys make it possible for everybody in the broader audience, tens of thousands of people every week, to listen to our show. It's because of your support every month. So please, thank you and everything for that. And I hope you enjoy my babbling here every Tuesday, because I know these are not great shows. These are just you get to hear the behind the scenes of what goes into my head as I think about the stuff that is not necessarily Disney, but I tell you kind of what goes on as to why we do the shows Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So we'll see. And also on this coming Monday show, I hope that we can do this one. If we do it, it's going to be recorded live at Walt Disney World, because the guest that's scheduled for tomorrow, because I record them on Wednesdays, she is at Walt Disney World. She's going to record from Bay Lake Tower at the business center, but she doesn't know if she's going to have access to a computer there. So it's kind of touch and go at this time. It could be a Mike and Scott show if she can't record, but if she can record, it's going to be awesome, because we're going to talk about her trip that's happening right now, which I'm hoping for, because I love current shows. And I mean, you can't get much more current than somebody who's at Walt Disney World right now. So that's very awesome. Pam Forrester right now, by the way, she's out at Disneyland. How good of a life is she living? She just told me a couple weeks ago, she goes, we're going to Disneyland, by the way, so I won't be at the recording on Monday. And I was like, oh, you're going to Disneyland? Wow, we're going on the podcast cruise here very soon. That's pretty cool. It's like, yeah, Hannah, her daughter, adult daughter. It's like, Hannah hasn't been to Disneyland in a long time, so we just thought we'd take her out there. So lucky Hannah and Pam and Steve. They're having the time. I saw a picture. They're having a great time. They were in Adventures Campus. There's apparently a photo spot where it looks like you're getting, kind of looked like Steve was getting, I don't know, like swirled down a drain or something. I'm not an Avengers guy, so I don't know the movie reference, but it was a cool looking picture. So they're having a good time out there, and we're getting ready for the podcast cruise. So that's kind of what's going on around here. Now's the time where I start to panic, because we're under 3 weeks. You guys know that I won't leave you without Be Our Guest podcast episodes. We'll have one on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, every day that we're gone. So I record early before we leave here to have them on the feed ready to go. So I'm going to be recording behind the scenes a lot of shows. So I start panicking because, where do I find time? I always have the time. And we'll kind of talk about that here on the main topic in a second. I have the time because I work from home, but it's always hard to try to find. I got to have a cohort, right? And Ricky's now got a baby, so that's kind of hard. Pam's out of town right now, so she's unavailable. Scott works hybrid, so he's at the office sometimes, and he golfs some nights and stuff. So we'll make it happen. I mean, it always works out. We'll get it done. And, even if I have to just do a show with me and callers, like I'll open up the phone lines, that kind of bails me out for some shows where we just turn it over to our callers. We'll do that. We'll have you some shows, I promise. And I'll make them worth your time. They're not just going to be throwaway shows. They're going to be fun. But it's that time where I get gray hairs, I think. By the time I get on the ship, I do need a cruise, because I stress out. I do all the work, of the time that I'm gone. But yeah, I'm starting to get super stressed about the cruise. But we're getting excited because, like, the t-shirts have come in. So we got, thanks again to listener Brooke, who put together our shirt design of it's kind of, if you've probably seen it by now, it's Sam Eagle kind of morphed into the shape of the Disney Wish. And our slogan is a salute to all podcasts, but mostly the Be Our Guest podcast for the cruise. So, because we're sailing over the 4th of July. So, we got that going on. We've got some activities that Scott got printed off at his office, thanks to Jackson up in Michigan, his company. We're kind of using them as well to help us out for some activities that we're going to be giving out at the port and using throughout the cruise to get to know you for our cruisers and for some fun activities there. So that we're excited for that. Those things are done and in the can. We got some prizes. We're just super excited to finally get out there and see everybody and sail with everybody and that kind of stuff. So we arrived Coronado on July 1st. I'm excited for that. We're taking a 5:50 flight out of St. Louis in the morning. My wife's not super excited about that. She's like, you can book those flights that early when it's just you. You don't book those when it's us. I said, well, I did because it's cheap. So we're flying out there and we're coming back on the 10th. So we're going to stay a few nights at the Grand Floridian after because I got a good deal on a discount. So we'll be gone from the 1st to the 10th. So we'll have lots of coverage on social media. So Be Our Guest Mike. I promise to put a lot of stuff up there. And I might record a podcast from Walt Disney World. I'm going to take my laptop, and it is capable. It wouldn't sound as good because I'm not going to take the microphone and the mixer. That's just too much to take on a cruise ship. But I might see if the microphone on the MacBook, because I got a new MacBook Air not too long ago, maybe just for one episode, we might be able to make the audio work, but we'll see. All right, so let's hit the feedback from last week's show. Last week we talked about, because I keep trying to make this a mini podcast, yet it ends up being as long as the episodes of the Be Our Guest podcast, which is never my intention. So I apologize for that. This was always meant to be a 15-minute show. And right now we're at about 12 minutes. So here we go. Blah, blah, blah. That's Mike Rallman. All right. So last week we talked about like, where do things go? If I could find toys from my past, like where are they? If they're not in a landfill or if they've not been incinerated, where are these things? They're sitting somewhere today. Like, I watch the Love Boat here in the office all the time, especially leading up to a cruise. And one of the things I was thinking about was those like Christmas lights that are on the Love Boat. I know the boat's gone. They sold the boat for scrap. But did some person that's a fan of the Love Boat like keep those Christmas lights and put them like in a shop somewhere, like in a museum? I'd love to have like a couple of bulbs out of there, just like because I'm a retro guy. That would be my jam because I love this show. But I wonder like things from my childhood, like where are those things? All right, here's what Trisha says. Up in Wisconsin, by the way. Hi, Trisha. My mom would pick up one of my dad's shirts. Oh, and I let it off because I talked about paint shirts. I had that dream. It was wild. I don't know what I ate that night. It started off because I had a dream about where's my paint shirt from like kindergarten, the art shirt that you had to wear, like my dad's art shirt. Like, where's my art shirt? Oh, whack. Anyway, Trish says my mom would pick one of my dad's shirts that she hated and sneak it into my school supplies as my art smock. That's right. They called him a smock. I forgot about that. That's true. The one I remember was a light blue cowboy button-up. That thing got so crusty with paint by the end of the year. 2 items that I still wonder where they are one, my baby feels so real. It was a baby doll filled with water that had a plastic skeleton inside. It felt just like a real baby. I left it in a grocery cart and never saw it again. That's interesting. And 2, Welch's used to make jam jars that had characters on it, Disney and Looney Tunes. Once you ate the jam, you could use it as a pretty sweet glass. We collected a ton throughout my childhood, but when we moved right before I started high school, I never saw them again. I should ask my parents what they did with them. You just brought up something that I'm curious about. So back in the day, okay, now you've got me going down a rabbit, like a bunny path where I might have to go like to an antique mall or something. And this is not going to end well for me because my wife hates junk. She hates collecting. She's a minimalist. She hates all the stuff behind me on the shelves. She hates stuff like that. That's why I can only do it in here. But here's the thing. This reminds me, my grandma Ruth, which I talk about in here, loved her. God, rest her soul. My grandma and grandpa loved them. My grandma would always take us to Hardee's, the grandkids, Hardee's and McDonald's, and always get us breakfast. But back in the day, they would have like collector's glasses. And I remember I had these ones that had the Muppets on them. And I had this one from I think it was the Great Muppet Caper, and I loved it. It was like, I just remember, and I'm gonna have to look this up. This is all from memory right now. I want to say it had like a stained glass window with like Gonzo or Miss Piggy or somebody like on a motorcycle, like crashing through a window. And I loved that glass. And I always drank out of it at grandma's. God, I wonder where that is. I would love to have that glass. I might have to go try to find one of those. They can't be that. I'd pay like $20 for that. That's how much I loved that glass. Okay, I'm doing research. Trisha, yes, cost me money. And my wife will yell at me. Why do you need a Muppets glass from the 80s? All right. And our other piece of feedback, Michelle says, "Hey, Mike, so glad to hear that a live Give Kids the World show is in the works for this fall." Yes, it is. We are going to do, just so you guys know, you're going to be the first to know right here. We're going to do a 6-hour live show live from Give Kids the World. It's going to be on September 8th, most likely. We haven't announced it yet. Probably this week, we're going to announce it. September 8th, it's a Saturday. And here's the other kicker. It's even better. We're going to do a Be Our Guest podcast volunteer day at the Village on that Friday before. So the Friday, we're going to get together as many people as we can. We're going to volunteer together at the Village on Friday. And then the team is going to do a live show on Saturday. I think it's going to be noon to 6 in the Village in the main hall to raise money for Give Kids the World. So we're going to have a live show 12 to 6 on Saturday. Friday, we're going to volunteer at the Village. It's going to be a fun weekend to raise money for the folks at Give Kids the World. So just keep that weekend in mind. I think it's the 5th and let me look on my calendar. I know it's a podcast, not real exciting. Let's see. It's the 8th and 9th of September. There you go. So just keep those, save the date like a wedding. And there we go. Okay, back to the comments. We're pretty sure those are the dates. We're getting to run through the Village. We had our meeting. Okay. Michelle says, just listened to the graduation episode, and the same day a friend from high school sent me a video I'd never seen from our graduation way back in 1990. It included interviews with us before and after the ceremony. I feel like it's only been 5 years from graduation, but seeing the footage made it clear how long ago it really was. It was wild to see. Our school was too small for an official project graduation, but it sounds like something I would have loved. Instead, some of the parents got together and threw a party for us with a DJ. Some fun, but not quite as epic. Yeah, I guess that was a good thing about going to a huge public high school. We had resources. It was wild. Yeah, it was crazy. Michelle continues, as for items from our past, I totally remember those Swatch watch clocks. Yeah, it was like 4 feet long. I mean, it was almost the length of your wall. It looked like a big Swatch watch. Oh, they're the best. The two things I think about where they ended up were my Smurf figurine collection. I had some of those, and so did my sister. And a ship's wheel coffee table that my grandparents had. You're not alone in wondering about these things. Okay, this is why I love y'all, because I know I'm weird. Like when I remember, like, wonder about these things, but you guys make me feel better because you guys say that you do the same. So thank you. Sincerely, thank you. Okay, today's topic. I was just thinking about this on the treadmill today. This should be called Mike on the Treadmill Thoughts or something instead of Mike in the Midwest. It's just, the alliteration is why we do the title. But I appreciate you guys. I just like to talk to you. Really, I just like to talk outside of Disney, and we're all friends. Basically, it's just like a Zoom call here, one way. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on this for next Tuesday's show. I wonder how my life has really changed when I became a travel agent from when I became a teacher. When I was a teacher, I left home every day, went to school, and did my Monday through Friday. And every day was a little bit different, right? Because, like Mondays we had art, Tuesdays we'd have PE and music, Wednesdays we might have library. Like everything changed, sometimes we have an assembly. But I'll tell you what, doing what I do, my days, 7 days a week, are very, very similar. And it can be like a mental struggle because I work 7 days a week. I book travel 7 days a week. Like I am not off on Saturdays or Sundays. I get up at the exact same time. I get up at 4:58 every morning, and I get in my treadmill workout every morning right as soon as I get up to start the day. And then I get right to my emails and start working. Then I get breakfast and so forth. I mean, I'm very routine oriented so that I can get what I need to get done in an orderly fashion. I do usually take a nap in the afternoon because I get up so early, a quick nap. But what it is with the way I've changed since 2017 with working from home, one of the things I told myself is that I'm not gonna because I was always scared to death to have like an office job, like a sit down job, because I didn't want to become like sedentary and worry about, the health dangers of sitting at a desk 8 hours a day. Because I've always been somebody who's like, when I taught, I was never at my desk. I was always building stuff with my kids, or we were always out doing stuff outside as much as possible, and I was always active with my kids. I was never at my desk. And so that was never a problem. But then when I was, became a travel agent, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be sitting at a desk typing the computer all day. So I do that a lot. I mean, that's just part of the job. But to counter that, I mean, if you see my activity on Instagram or whatever, I do walk and run quite a bit of miles every day to counter that. I do some in the morning, I do some late morning, and I do some in the afternoon just to kind of break up the day. But anyway, what I was thinking about to talk about today is that, with me since 2017, I do almost the same thing every day. Like every Monday, we record 2 podcast episodes. Every Monday, we record the Wednesday show and we record the Friday show. And on Tuesdays, I record Mike in the Midwest. On Wednesdays, in the evenings, we record the Monday show, the Trip Report show. And then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I don't have any podcasts. Those are kind of that's like my 3 days off from podcasting. I take a little break. And then on Sunday evenings, we do the live call-in shows. And the cycle continues. Like we all have this in our life, right? Because this is just how life works. It's the routine, it's the pattern of life. But I want to get your feedback, because the thing is, like with me, it just over and over and over. But with my work, it's 7 days a week. It's the same thing. Like I get up at the exact same time every single day, 7 days a week. And even, maybe Christmas Day, I will not get up quite as early. But other holidays I do, because I still want to get to working, because people are still traveling on Thanksgiving Day. People are still traveling on New Year's Day. I still have people on cruise ships. I still have people on, at Walt Disney World, and I still have to be available for that. So it is kind of a unique job. But what I've noticed is you have to be grateful for what you get to do every day to really, because you have 2 choices every day, right? You could say it's a grind and it's like, oh man, just got to make it through another day. But the thing is, you don't know how many days you're going to get. And I hate to say that, but you don't. And you got to be grateful for the things you do get to do. And so I was thinking about this, and I love what I do. Like I love that I get to help people, and because I get emails from guests all the time saying, we had a good time at Walt Disney World. We got to make these memories with the grandkids. We got to ride, Seven Dwarfs Mine Train for the first time. We got to get a picture with our granddaughter with Goofy, and it was so much fun. Or we took our child for the very first time to see the Millennium Falcon. Whatever it is, you guys know, you guys are Disney fans. We went on our honeymoon. I get to hear this stuff, and how lucky am I to be like the world's smallest part in that, but to still have a part in that, to be lucky enough to get to do that. So that's a victory for me. And the thing is, you could say, oh, well, it's a job, but it's not a job. It's a privilege. It's an honor to get to do that. But also in the everyday life, you got to look and say, like, I get to work from home where I don't have to, sit in traffic. That's a blessing. You got to find the blessing in everything you do. You could say, well, I don't get to get out in the world, because I do kind of miss every once in a while. Like you could look at it 2 ways, and you got to kind of churn it around, right? I miss, I have a Jeep, right? With the top down. Some days I do miss the commute, because I used to love driving my Jeep Wrangler with the top down to school. Like I like that time, listening to the radio, cruising, no doors, no windows. But I can do that when I go to Taco Bell later after the podcast, in the evening. But I also like, sitting here in the office, I got Love Boat on in the background, watching that as I work. I couldn't do that as a teacher. That's a blessing that I didn't used to get to have. I mean, that's a cool thing. I love that where I am in life every night. And I mean, this sounds like such a minor thing, but I mean, how like I end every night with a Little Debbie snack. I know that's a super minor thing, but it's something that makes me happy. In my pantry, I always have little Debbie's, little snack cakes. And every night I have a glass of milk and a little Debbie snack, and that makes me happy before bed. It's just one of those things. It just is. I'm a simple guy. I don't need much. I want to watch the ball game at night. I want to get my work done, and I want to have a little Debbie snack. And that's, and I want to have and I always tell myself, like, I have a podcast, and I always wanted to be a teacher, and I got to have a teaching career for 17 years, and I loved it. It was fun because I always thought teaching would be a cool thing to do, and I got to do it, and I got to go out on my own terms. Like, I did it for as long as I wanted to. I did it for 17 years, and I always wanted to work in radio because I spent time working as a DJ for my dad. I DJ'd wedding receptions and proms and all kinds of parties all around St. Louis for about 10 years, like in high school and college. Every Saturday night I was at a party. And I love that, but I always wanted to work in like AM radio. I wanted to do talk radio. That's my thing. Music was okay, but I wanted to be like the talk radio guy. And now for over 15 years, I've gotten to come as close to radio as I can. And I've gotten to have a broader audience than I would have if I'd have ever worked in radio, in St. Louis. Like, think about it. We've had guests on here from Australia, Japan, Europe, and I've made friends from all over. My dad was telling me, they tried to do a cruise for his radio station 3 years. It was before, it was like 2019. It was pre-COVID. They couldn't get 50 people to sign up to sail with them. We have over 100 from our podcast on our sixth cruise. So it's amazing to be able to have a podcast like ours that has a community that cares for each other like we do, because our listeners are more than listeners. They're friends. They care about each other. They'll support each other. We all care about each other. It's an amazing thing. It's a blessing. So today's kind of rambling, but what I wanted to ask you was this, kind of to wrap this up, because again, mini podcast and it's going forever. Do you in your everyday find the blessings, and what are they? Because I know a lot of us have super stressful jobs. I know what your jobs are because I've known a lot of you guys for a long time. You guys have amazing, super stressful jobs. I know you guys, but where do you find the blessings? Like, what's your little Debbie cake at the end of the night that makes you grateful? That's so simple, but it's your grateful thing. Like your love boat that you get to watch during the day. I know that's not a big deal, but it is to me, because I couldn't have done that when I was a teacher, but I can now. It's not a big deal though, but it is. There are so many things. I don't have to drive, but I could say that's a negative, but it's not. It's a positive. So where are you grateful, and where do you enjoy your everyday? Because otherwise you could say it's just a monotonous existence. It's every day. It's like Groundhog Day. It's like every day, every day. But if you look and say, oh, today I get to record 2 podcasts. I love doing the shows. I love Mondays. They're so fun because I love doing the shows. I love Tuesdays because I get to get on here and talk about something other than Disney. Not that I don't like talking about Disney, but this is kind of freeing because I just get to talk about other random stuff. It's just different. So it's kind of fun. And on Wednesdays, I love talking about other people's trips because I get to hear their stories. I get to interview. I don't get to do that a lot. So it's all about perspective, I think. But here's what I want to get from you for next week's feedback. Patreon.com/BRGS podcast. Where do you find your everyday happiness? How do you enjoy every day? Because I think if we hear your feedback, it'll help us all collectively find the little everyday joys, because it can be tough sometimes. And I think you might help all of us enjoy every day. I think that's really what it's all about. All right. So I'm going to jump out of here. I made a mini podcast, a regular podcast, and I'll try to make that better for all of us next week. All right. You guys have a great week. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks again for your support. I appreciate you guys so much. You guys, I will see you real soon.